Hey everybody, Seth Gemman here with Living Large and Tiny Living. And I was thinking recently, what 5 things would I change if I could change them about my tiny house? And I'm generally pretty happy with my tiny house. So I don't know that these things I would necessarily change if I could, because some of these things, they were really just a side effect of what I wanted. It's kind of a give and take in building the tiny house as to what you're really wanting. You have to prioritize because there's certain things that you're not going to get in your tiny house just because of the limitations of building. And so the first thing that I would say that I would change somehow, I'd like to change this, would be just the overall weight of the entire tiny house. And I was kind of considering what could I do to change that. And there's not much I really could do if I wanted to get everything that I got in the tiny house. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, well, I could do lighter cabinets, a little thinner wood that would have made a difference, made it a little bit lighter. I could have, now I already went with pretty lightweight sheetrock, but if I could have found some sort of other replacement for the sheetrock that could have got the same look, I would have gone with that if it was lighter. But there's really not anything, in my opinion, that quite matches sheetrock. Now, there's been some issues with it. There's been some cracks from going down the road, and it's very, very heavy. So those 2 things I would have figured out some way to change there. So that's kind of another point is the sheetrock. I would have done something with that a little bit different if I could have. Now I tried to minimize all the issues with the sheetrock that I could, but there's just so much that you can do, and beyond that, you just kind of have to deal with it. So I wanted sheetrock. I knew it would more than likely have some cracks in it, and I believe it's been several hundred miles at this point, and none of the cracks are too bad. There's the crack above the door. That's the worst of all of them. The rest are pretty small and are easy to cover up if I move it somewhere, and then I just do a little small patch for that. So I knew that going in. So that's one thing I would like to have kind of changed somehow. Now, another thing that I would have liked to have done was have it better set up for off-grid capabilities. So I have some solar panels that are in the process of being installed. We're not quite there yet, but eventually I'll have that up there. But there's things that I could have done that would have made it a little bit more user-friendly for the off-grid stuff. One of those being using 12-volt lights. I used just regular house lights, and I knew things like that would kind of cost me on off-grid and would use a little bit more energy than just running it straight from 12 volt or 48 volt or whatever the case is. And so I would like to have done something more with that, but just for ease of building, 1, and 2, knowing that I'll probably be connected to the grid for a vast majority of my time. That's why I went with regular house lights and just different various appliances that don't run off of the 48 volts, which would have made it easier, less draw, having to go through the inverter and all that. But that's something that I had to take into consideration and just weigh that. But I think if I did it again, I would probably change that. Now, another thing that I can guarantee you that I would do different next time? No. Well, I guarantee you I would want to do it different, but I don't know I would, because it's time consuming. So here's the deal. I didn't put a plan, a design together for the tiny house before I started building. And that wasn't terrible, but it did make it a lot harder because I had to consider everything going into the tiny house as it went into the tiny house. So there wasn't too much trial and error that could take place in the plan room, So that's something I would definitely redo and do a little differently. And actually, with the plans, my plan for that is hopefully that this summer I'll get enough time that I can make the plans for this tiny house and put those out there so people can see it and see those plans. But I don't know if I'll get to that anytime soon. So just, you can subscribe and go over to Living Large and Tiny Living on Facebook and Instagram, and I'll probably put it out there as well when that time comes. But that's something I would have changed and would have done differently. And I realize that doesn't really have to do necessarily so much with the actual tiny house, but it definitely did have a huge impact on my building the tiny house. Final thing that I would have probably changed if I could do it again was add some more water storage. And I've got about a little less than 50 gallons, and that's not too bad. And that's a pretty decent sized water storage for the tiny house, especially considering I'll be connected to the grid most of the time. But this sort of goes along with that off-grid thing. I would have liked to have more water storage and probably some more gray water and black water storage as well, because that will kind of limit it too. But that's one last thing that I probably would have changed. Beyond that, there's not much I would really do differently. I'm sure there's little other things that I didn't think of, but that's the big ones that I would have changed if I could go back and do it again. Now, if I could have a second tiny house somehow, I could build a second one, that one I would do completely differently, to be honest with you. Now, not because I don't like this one. It's just because if I could only have one tiny house, this is definitely what I would pick. But if somehow, theoretically, I could do a second one, I would do it very different. I would make it a very small tiny house that could go down the road really easily. I would put things like some sort of material on the inside that was really easy to pull down the road without having that concern that it's going to break, crack, or anything like that. I would have done it a lot lighter. I would make it totally off grid, so that way I could just go wherever I wanted to. I would probably do a bumper pull instead of a gooseneck, again, just for the size of the trailer. Make it easy to pull with anything. Well, to a certain extent, you're obviously not going to be able to pull it with a Prius, but probably a small truck. That's the kind of the major things I would change, because this one is kind of on the giant home end of the tiny house spectrum. So I'd go probably to the entire opposite end of the spectrum, something that was really easy to pull, really small, and then that way I could kind of compare the two. Now, that's probably never going to happen, but I would really like to do that. So that's what I would do if I could do something differently. That's about it, though. So if you want to stay up to date with other updates coming out, you can like and subscribe here, and you can also go over to Facebook and Instagram, and I'll be getting some updates out there as well. So you can stay up to date everywhere. And that's about it. So I'll quit rambling at this point. Just make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and you'll stop me from rambling. So anyway, I'll see you on the next video.